Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel, where I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. Hallo zusammen, says I don't know nothing. It was good to see you in the other stream today. I have to say, I really like that game, En Garde. I really enjoy it. I like the combination of the sort of tongue-in-cheek sword fighting and the comedic dialogue and stuff, but I ended up, like, really a bit seasick from the camera movement mechanics in that thing because it focuses the camera on whoever you're currently fighting and it decides that for you. And so I actually had to lie down for in the dark for a couple of hours. Yeah, I mean not for a couple of hours, but like for like half an hour after that just to kind of get my just to sort of shake off the motion sickness. So, how's everybody doing? Got a number of options that we can look at. There's Como Salvador Allende empobreció a los chilenos, a right-wing dude from Spain who's going to destroy Salvador Allende with facts and logic, apparently. Um, hmm. We've got Jimmy Dore doing the full transphobe arc. With the griftery of fake ass Dr. Phil. We've got that let me see. Okay, good. Good. Just had to make sure I have enough space on my drive to record the stream so I don't have to download it later because I can record it in better quality than it'll be up on YouTube for when I clip it and stuff. So, what else have we got? Woke cartoon roasted for promoting theft and crime. Wokeism only makes sense if you lie to yourself. From Pim Tool. And, what else have we got? We've got Caleb Maupin debunking Javier Milei's Davos speech, and that's two assholes who are completely full of shit. We've got Vush on the what he calls the next Benedict conspiracy, and I'm not exactly sure what direction he intends to take that in, but I don't think it's going to be good. We've got Socialism is pro-growth from Caleb Muppet. Hey, Riveroon, good to see you again. So, anything jump out at you? Any of those would you particularly like to check out? Oh, and we've also got the train wreck of a Finkelstein, Destiny, Muin Rabani, Benny Morris debate. Yeah, I feel like there must be a setting to adjust that. So that it doesn't happen so abruptly, because that was, I mean, I really enjoy that game, except for except for the motion sickness. Yeah, Dr. Phil or Muppet, or like Destin, like the most ridiculous debate lineup ever. Like three people who are like legit scholars on the subject. Benny Morris is a Zionist ghoul, but he is a legit historian who did like some of the seminal work on the history of the Nakba. He just thinks that he just thinks that quite explicitly that Israel should have finished the Nakba. Versus Destiny, a guy who read like a Wikipedia page 5 minutes before going on. And it's apparently just as much as a train wreck as you would think. Okay, Dr. Phil. I'm kind of moving in the direction of Dr. Phil as well. Yeah, I mean it's Joe Rogan, Dr. Fool, and Jimmy Dore. So it's like a grifter trifecta. Yeah, I feel like that might be a good thing to check out. So we're gonna do that. Like, I mean, fake ass Dr. Phil. Like, none of these motherfuckers have any qualification to be talking about any of this. But they all know a grift when they see one. Dr. Phil is easily, I mean, it's
Dr.
like
Phil
a
was
toss
on.
up between Mehmet Oz and Dr. Phil for like the worst thing that Oprah brought into our lives. Because both of those motherfuckers got their
Dr.
big
Phil
break
was
on
on, and he
Oprah.
was talking about the trans movement. And he was on with Joe Rogan, and here's what he has to say about it.
It's interesting they choose words like gender affirming care.
They being the entire like mental health profession, every single professional association that's relevant to this.
That's interesting that they call it that, but really what they're talking about is hormonal therapy or sex reassignment surgery.
Well, not necessarily, but it's certainly included in there. And yes, they, i.e., like everybody who knows anything about this, all do call it that. Cause see, what's interesting about that is that's what it fucking is.
On children.
Gender deforming.
Well, no, they don't perform that shit on children. Like, what he's saying is just nonsense. Like, on children, gender affirming care, I mean, I think chat, I think you all probably know this, but I'm just going to say it because, people who aren't in chat who see this, if there's somebody who isn't in chat who ends up seeing this might not know this. Gender affirming care in children basically means new pronouns, maybe a new wardrobe and haircut, and, a new name. That's it. I mean, maybe a little bit later, possibly puberty blockers, which are 100% reversible.
In fairness, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Endocrine Society, or whatever the exact name of that is, all of the major medical associations have signed off on this, Joe.
Yeah, so it's just you who hasn't even got a clinical license. Like, I mean, this guy he pretends to be a clinical psychologist. I mean, his thing is that he's like before he achieved media grift stardom thanks to Oprah, his thing was he was just an expert for hire. But he has never treated patients. He is not licensed to treat patients. He literally has he has no experience in this area. Like, literally, there's no reason anyone should want to talk to this motherfucker other than he's got, like, a fucking media persona.
They've signed off on it. And I have never seen those organizations sign off on anything with less information as to whether or not it does long-term harm.
There's tons of information. I mean, maybe he means, I get it. He's saying that he's never seen anything where he is less informed on the subject. And that I also think would be stiff competition because this motherfucker isn't very well informed on anything.
Anything in my life. And when I ask about that, when I bring that up, then they immediately label you as transphobic.
Well, yes, because what you're saying is bullshit. When you say the bullshit, they think it's the transphobia. They don't understand they don't understand that you might not have anything against trans people, but you're just doing a grift at trans people's expense. Like, I mean, they're so fucking judgmental about when people go and promote pseudoscience that hurts large numbers of people.
And I thought that the deal was first do no harm. And
how the fuck would you, like, he's talking about the Hippocratic Oath. He's never had to take the Hippocratic Oath because he is not clinically licensed in anything.
And all of the European countries, Sweden, Norway, they've all stopped.
Wow, that's all the European countries, both of them, Sweden and Norway.
Stop doing it because they say, we cannot say in good conscience that this does no harm.
No, that's actually also not true. Even leaving aside his interesting geography of the two European countries. Oh. Cool. I hope the dog sitting and house sitting are going well. Well, he does have a degree in psychology. That he does have. What he does not have is a license as a clinical psychologist, which requires additional training and additional exams and continuing education. The sorts of things that would actually lead a person, possibly if they were not just a grifter, to realize that what he's saying right here is bullshit.
Because it does harm.
As according to evidence, which he doesn't have.
If you look at the long-term consequences, if someone changes their mind at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, they can't decide which pajamas they want to wear at night. And they're...
Yeah, that's totally the same sort of thing. See, I mean, because, like, your gender is, like, what kind of pajamas you want to wear at night. Like, I mean, this is the sort of interview you have to go to, like, Joe Rogan or the rest of the far-right griftosphere to check out.
The reason for doing it is it stops this drive for suicide, that there's a suicide epidemic. It does.
Yeah, well... Yeah, it
doesn't fix that.
Well, it actually turns out to help quite a lot. It actually turns out to help substantially, motherfucker.
It doesn't fix all the comorbid issues that come along with feeling like they're in the wrong body.
No, that's not what a comorbid issue is. Like, okay, a comorbid issue... I mean, he uses this term because Joe Rogan's audience are a sucker for somebody who uses a word they have to look up. Like, especially if he's saying the bullshit that they want to believe anyway. But comorbid literally means just there is other stuff going on, not necessarily in any way related to having gender identity issues. And yeah, solving one problem does not solve all of the others necessarily. You know, like, if you have a gunshot wound, say, taking that bullet off is not going to do shit for your high blood pressure. That's not a reason not to take the bullet out, though.
But yet they're pushing this, and...
Oh, I see I've got a spam bot. Well, get rid of that real quick. Burn. There. By universal strength.
And we're going to do some shows that are already taped that are revealing what the real results of this are. And I think people are going to be shocked that these medical organizations have signed off on this. I think...
well, yeah, because, I mean, medical associations, why should they sign off on something just based on studies and peer review and meta-analyses and stuff? But when you haven't even waited to see whether the right-wing grifter talk show on television agrees with you, because that's what we should all be making medical decisions based on.
I think they've just given in to the pressure.
To whose pressure?
So he's...
Like, the pressure from who? Like, literally the only pressure that there is would be from patients who need this and people who care about those patients and want them to have what they need. And if there is so much pressure coming from the people who need this, maybe it's because it's good for them. Hello, NR.
He's got one more. Let's go. Let's watch a little bit more of this.
I've talked to a lot of teachers, and they're telling me that they have a duty to the children, that if the child is not ready to talk to their parents about this, that it's okay for them to keep a secret from the child. Now,
Oh, damn right it is, because it's, first of all, It's called a right to privacy. Second of all, you don't know what it's going to do to that kid if those parents find out about it. Like, I mean, you don't know what kind of fucking home they're going back to. That could actually have all sorts of fucked up consequences. So yeah, if the kid is afraid to tell their parents, they probably have a reason for that, or either that or they're just not ready. Like, so what's the solution here? I mean, the solution, like guys like fucking Dr. Fool want, is a situation where kids can't tell anybody about this because somebody might snitch, because their parents might, because nobody will keep their confidences.
Let me tell you what my problems with this are, and see what you think.
I think I think we can all agree. If there's one thing that we all care about, it's Dr. Phil's problems with this. Please tell us more. Totally unqualified dude who only recently got on this grift at kind of the tail end. Yeah, Benny Morris is gross. But he has way more qualification to be in a debate on the subject than fucking Destiny, because at the very least he actually does know about the shit. He's full of shit, and he's like a genocidal Zionist asshole, extremely racist. But like, he also just knows about the shit. So, like, unlike Destiny is an extremely racist asshole, but he doesn't know anything. So it's just, the only reason Destiny is there is that Nazi-ass guy, that Lex Friedman asshole, decided that would add clicks. Like, I mean, and I have a lot of problems with Finkelstein. There's a lot of shit that I have to say not a fan of about this sort of cringe arc, the transphobia and all that. But, I mean, the smackdown that he gives to fucking Destiny, I have to say, he was in very rare form there.
First off, if this is either a psychological phenomenon or a medical phenomenon.
It is possible for something to be both.
And the teachers are not trained in either psychology or medicine.
Wow, so that's something you got in common with them. No wonder you empathize.
They're not any more trained to deal with that than they are to take out the kid's spleen in the homeroom.
Which is totally the same thing as keeping a kid's confidence until they are ready to work out whether they want to tell their parents about something they're experiencing.
So if that's true, if it's a psychological thing, if it's gender dysphoria, or it's a medical issue, then you need someone trained in child psychology, psychiatry, or medicine. And the teacher's not trained in any of those three things.
Well, the teacher is what do you need them to do what? I mean, literally the only thing that's being asked of the teacher is to not betray a child's confidence. I think that you don't necessarily need a degree in any of those things to not betray a child's confidence. I think you just need to not suck. You need to not be a
Like I say, they're not any more trained in that than they are to take out the child's spleen. So how are they qualified to deal with that?
Nobody's asking them to deal with that. Nobody's asking them to write a fucking prescription for blockers.
Secondly, it's teaching the child to keep a secret from their parents.
No, it isn't. The child already learned that. For some reason, the child has already said, this is not something I can tell my parents. They weren't already taught that. They're not, like, taught not to keep secrets by not having anyone to confide in. Like, literally, what the hell?
Teaching deception.
No, it isn't teaching it. What? Like, so confiding in people is deception?
And
I thought deception was like when you hold yourself out to be some sort of clinical psychologist, just to name an example, when actually you're not licensed to do that. I would have thought that was more of an example of deception, as opposed to going to your homeroom teacher and saying, there's some stuff I'm going through and I don't feel like I can tell my parents about it right now, but I need somebody to talk to.
Interfering between the child's relationship with their parent. Now, their issue with their justification for that is, well, if the child goes home and announces this, or if we tell it to the parent, then the child could get abused. The child could.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. That is a very real problem, because actually it turns out trans kids often experience abuse more often than cis kids, are more likely to end up homeless than cis kids. I mean, like, seriously, there's all sorts of shit that could happen.
Get judged. The child could get kicked to the curb. But they have to admit, statistically, that is very rare.
No, it fucking isn't, actually. And, I mean, statistically, since Dr. Phil is doing the math on us now, I mean, I don't think that you could actually find a specific study that you could cite about the percentage of kids who are worried about what their parents will say or do if they hear that they're trans or they're queer in some other way, versus how many of them actually ended up getting, like, abused or kicked to the curb or something like that. I don't think that study exists, but my tendency would be to assume that if kids are worried about that, that's going to be resolved in one of two ways. Either they ultimately say, you know, I think I can tell my parents after all, now I have more of a grip on it, they'll be okay with it, somehow that's been resolved that way. Or the parents really are going to cause serious problems, they are going to do something fucked up as a result, and the kid was right. And I think that's probably in the subset of kids who are afraid to tell their parents about this stuff, that they're probably more likely to be right about that.
And if that's the case, that's what we have Department of Child and Family Services for. That's what we have Child Protective Services for.
Wait, so the idea, what's the solution here? What's the suggestion? If a kid tells their teacher they're trans, the teacher should immediately call up child services?
If that's the case, then you call in for some intervention if the child is being abused at home for whatever reason. Then you get intervention in that way, but you don't come between the child and their parent. The parent.
What? Okay, wait. So the idea is you don't take the child's fears seriously and allow and respect their confidence and the trust they put in you. But you do call the overburdened child services department after you snitch on them, betray their confidence, and it goes south, and now this kid's being physically abused as a result of you betraying their fucking confidence to parents that they were afraid of. That's his solution to this. That's his fucking solution. Dr. Phil reminds me of the way he looks in this. You remember A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle? The cover had this head, this shaven head, looking sort of blankly, and it had this sort of thing on it, like this big metal thing, and he reminds me of the 1980s cover of A Wrinkle in Time. I'm gonna see if I can find that, so you can see what I'm talking about. It's been years since I saw it. It'll be interesting to see if I'm remembering it well. Images. I remember that head actually sort of creeped me out a little bit when I was about 10 years old and reading it in school. So I am quite curious. So I'm sure that cover, that must be someplace on the internets. But that's what Dr. Phil looks like. It's like the head on like Camazots or something like that. It's supposed to be, I think. Would have been late 80s, I'm pretty sure. Ah, there we are. I found it. Gonna drop the link in chat. That's what I'm reminded of by Dr. Fool here. Oh, I wouldn't mind being stoned at the moment. Yeah, I mean...
Parent has the right to know what's going on.
So who would have thought?
The parent has the right to know what's going... I mean, you see, usually people who are better at this grift pretend that they don't know what possible reason somebody might want to not tell their parents these things, but have someone to talk to. He, on the other hand, leads with, yeah, sometimes these kids get physically abused as a result of it, sometimes they end up homeless as a result of it, but the parents have a right to know.
We get such clear thinking from Dr. Phil. And here's Joe Rogan's response.
Yeah, speaking of clear thinking.
To that.
Because you can talk kids into almost anything. You talk them into believing in Santa Claus. You talk kids into believing in all kinds of ridiculous shit.
Well, yeah, except here's the thing. This isn't a case of kids being talked into something. This is and then believing it. This is a case of kids believing something despite literally everyone in their lives telling them otherwise.
They're really young. You could easily convince them in one way or another that they're anything. That
he sounds like he's tried this.
They're queer, that they're trans. You could 100% convince some kids of all kinds of things, especially by reinforcing it with love and support and happiness.
Yeah, you can do anything with love and support and happiness. Like,
you can convince people of a lot of things. That's what's uncomfortable for a lot of people.
I mean, he speaks as someone who knows that you can indeed convince people of a lot of things. He has convinced people of a lot of things.
A lot of gay people, they're uncomfortable with the idea that a lot of these kids are just going to grow up to become gay. My friend Tim Dillon's talked about that a bunch. He says it's...
I love this line because, I mean, and it just shows that he is absolutely innocent of any contact with, like, the trans community, that he thinks that all trans people are straight. That he thinks that, like, they would only be gay from the perspective of if they'd been... their sexual orientation would only be gay from the perspective if they had, like, not transitioned. Like, I mean, it's amazing to me in this year of 2024 that there are still people who apparently use that line.
Homophobic.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. If you give your kids happiness, you can convince them of anything. And the idea is, of course, that, I mean, convincing that, trying to convince a cis kid that they are in fact trans and must act accordingly, like, which does not happen. Let's just be serious here. Is consistent with, like, with happiness somehow, as opposed to being consistent with dysphoria.
It's like they're trying to say, no, you're a girl, when really maybe you're just gay. Like, that's okay. Yeah. It was always a thing, and now all of a sudden it's getting... You're looking at little kids. It might just be gay kids. You're saying maybe you're a girl. Maybe you need to go to a gender reassigning surgery center and never have an erection or an orgasm for the rest of your life. Like,
all these motherfuckers are way too interested in little kids' fucking erections and shit.
What the fuck are we doing?
Yeah,
they're so young.
Yeah, I mean, I that's a very good question. What the fuck are you doing? Yeah, that is absolutely. I want to know the answer. What the fuck are you doing?
It's not. I don't think it's appropriate or safe for children, and I think there is a huge body of literature that addresses these issues from end to end. There's not a huge body of literature about the transgender population, and that's the problem.
Yeah, but what literature there is says the exact opposite of what you two are here saying.
And what literature is out there suggests that you get, and this is what you see from the European countries.
Yeah, both of them, both Norway and Sweden, all the European countries. Yeah.
We've done study after study from these suppressive hormones compared to doing psychotherapy, and there's not much difference. If you do psychotherapy,
No, first of all, what the hell are suppressive hormones? I believe he means hormone suppressors, i.e. puberty blockers. And if he's saying that blockers versus psychotherapy, first of all, let's just assume that's true for a second. It's not, it really is not true. But if it is, 12 of one, half dozen of another, and the patient would prefer to be on blockers, then what's the fucking problem? Then it's clearly not doing harm, because your preferred solution, Dr. Fool, is apparently like conversion therapy. And if it's just as good one way as the other, then why do you care? Second of all, that's just not true. Like, literally, puberty blockers are a life-saving intervention.
you can ease the depression, you can ease the suicidal tendencies.
Like, literally, no, actually. Access to blockers, timely access to blockers, has a huge advantage in reducing, like, suicidal ideation and action compared to virtually any other kind of intervention. Like, affirming trans kids' gender is the gold standard. That, Dr. Phil, is why all of the actual professionals in the field say one thing, and your ass on Joe Rogan's podcast is saying another.
With psychotherapy without doing the irreversible things. They say, well, you can reverse those things. No, that's not true. If you arrest the development, that can have ramifications long term, or at least they can't say it doesn't have ramifications long term.
Well, actually, you can say it doesn't, because this stuff has been used. Puberty blockers have been in use since the 1980s in both cis and trans kids, and there have been no problems. There have literally been no problems long term. If you go off them, they are 100% reversible. What he's saying is just nonsense.
Also, serious side effects from the hormone blockers.
Well, of course.
No, they're not.
And if you're doing testosterone blockers, for example,
he thinks that there are two different kinds of blockers. This motherfucker is sitting here talking like he's some sort of expert on this. He literally does not realize that actually the blockers are the blockers, that it's actually the same thing. Puberty blockers prevent the release of whatever sex hormones are coming out.
That does have long-term
consequences.
No,
and fucks your bones up.
My point is, they can't say it doesn't. They don't have a body of literature that says it doesn't.
Yes, they fucking do, though. They literally fucking do. And like, and fucking Jimmy Doris over here, like, I mean, he easily knows less than either of these jabronis, and he's just sitting here and like just nodding along. Like, fuck this guy. Like, fuck all these guys.
So let me bring in Mel K. What's your response to reaction?
Who the fuck is Mel K? Okay, that is a hilarious username she's got, though. Melkschuh. If you speak German, or actually Dutch or Afrikaans as well, and you see Melkschuh, that means milking show. Okay, who the hell is Mel K? Okay, already getting off to a good start. Welcome, Truth Seeker. You're here for a reason. So that's the sort of person we're going to be apparently asking now about this. Who the hell is she? Okay, let's see. I'm gonna just check out her Twitter. What have we got? Functioning outside the Matrix. I love this. They're like, okay, using the Matrix, which is a fucking trans allegory. Oh, she's a long COVID denialist. Um, oh yeah, she's fash. She's just wow, like impressively full of shit. And yes, Palestine, hurrah, hurrah.
To seeing something like that.
Well, I think there's three things going on here. One is they're creating big pharma clients for life.
Yep.
Okay, first of all, who's they?
People don't like to think that way, but that is absolutely true. I think.
Yeah, except Big Pharma has not shown a whole lot of interest in servicing trans people. Trans people are not what you'd call a huge market.
I think that also people have to understand this is coming from the Agenda 2030 17 development goals. This is coming from you.
The Agenda 2030 17 development goals. Like, okay, what are those? Yeah, I mean, we're getting into some far-right militia shit. Introduction, what are the goals? Okay, literally, trans people are not mentioned. This is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. See, far right like militia types claim this is all sorts of things. The people who think that they're going to be like UN soldiers occupying the U.S. You know, the UN, you know, the people who literally can't stop a fucking genocide in Gaza because the U.S. keeps saying no to them. The people who are putting this bullshit out actually think the UN is gonna occupy the U.S. and all this shit.
UNESCO, the world education system that comes out of Lucis Trust. What this also has a lot to do with
Lucis Trust. What the hell is that? Oh, the esoteric meaning of Lucifer. Oh, wow. Yeah, this is like fucking hell. Like, this is really, really mask off. This is just fast shit.
With is Mao's China. Like I told you, I wrote a script once about Mao's China and people getting out of there. And I'll tell you.
Wow, she wrote a script about Mao's China and people getting out of there. So clearly, she's somebody to ask about trans people.
The first thing they did was they told you that your parents weren't your parents, that Mao was your father, that the state was your.
She knows all about this. She wrote the script.
God, and a lot of this has to do with eroding children's connections, not only to their parents but also their self-esteem, their self-worth. Now they're getting it from the state.
What? Was she told what this was going to be about? Or is this like a recording? Is this like her voicemail? He dialed her in and she wasn't there. And so she says, "Hi, this is Mel K. Please leave a message." This is probably to do with Agenda 2030's Sustainable Development Goals. And if it's not that, it's the Lucis Trust. And did you know, I wrote a script about Mao once. So, like, what does this have to do with anything?
and I believe that they are creating little Eichmann type. Some of these kids are going to end up believing that the state, you know, when Eichmann was put to death, his last thing he said was that he was a good soldier and he was loyal to his Führer and his flag, and he'd do it again.
I mean, okay, on one level, I will say it is not wrong to be juxtaposing Joe Rogan, Dr. Fool, Jimmy Dore, and whatever the fuck this is. But what she hasn't, like, what?
And I'll tell you right now, I think a lot of this has to do with having a generation of children that will never be able to fight back because they're so messed up in the head, and they
Fight back against what? I mean, actually, trans people seem to be pretty good at fighting back, actually.
have no self-esteem, no self-worth. A lot of their foundation is crushed, and they're not teaching them the real things that they need to succeed in life or be
Yeah, because everybody's talking about the Lucis Trust and the esoteric value of Lucifer or something.
entrepreneurs or be even creative. And then on top of that, they're creating a generation of kids that think that their parents don't love them. There is no God, but the school, which is the state, loves them, and they.
Wow, I mean, this woman does numbers. Okay, have a good night, I don't know nothing. Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely some protocols bullshit, NR. I mean, the people who, like, I haven't heard Fash talking about the 2030 development goals in, basically the last time I heard them actually talking about this shit, Dr. Schill, I like it, is like literally when those development goals were first adopted, and the people who talk about the UN black helicopters, you know, basically like Timothy McVeigh types, they're totally, I mean, it is very much going connected to some protocols bullshit.
They have a loyalty to the state that supersedes their family, and
the state is actually opposing this, right? How exactly are you building loyalty to the state by having people be trans when the state is like either explicitly against trans people or explicitly against doing shit to protect trans people? Like, how is that making trans people loyal to the state? I would have thought the other way around.
and you know, tradition. And I really think that they're creating a couple generations of children that will never ever be able to stand up against the authority that they are creating in their totalitarian one world plan.
Oh, a totalitarian one world plan, of course. Like, holy shit.
It's not even a state. That's even more secure. It's a free floating, whatever company, like brand.
Kurt Metzger, that name is familiar. Who is he? No, I'm thinking of Tom Metzger. Yeah, I mean, God, these are wonderfully dodgy far-right people. I mean, he's just surrounding himself. He is not even pretending at this point. He's just surrounding himself with straight-up fash.
And loyalty. The state is like quaint. People are like loyal to brands like it's a political party, and they try to make it. You're not supposed to just advertise.
It's kind of the other way around, actually. I mean, it's the whole, I mean, political parties are using branding shit in order to generate that sort of completely irrational, totally hollow brand loyalty.
Advertise some goods. You're supposed to become like a lifestyle brand.
Like, what the fuck does this have to do with anything? Like, this is actually less coherent than a Tim Pool panel discussion. And that's saying something.
Like, and then you, the individual person, you're
We
not
were talking about, like, trans people. What does this have to do with anything?
even the goddamn cow that you put a brand on. You're the brand. You're not even like a sentient creature.
The cow that you... Oh, that kind of brand. Okay. It's like, what the fuck?
And a lot of these are kids that are being bullied. A lot of these are kids that have...
Being bullied by people who say the bullshit that you are saying here. You are literally encouraging the people who bully them.
Autism. A lot of these are the children that they're saying, you know, they don't fit in. And then they have the 60,000 counselors that the Department of Education put all over the country and put in these schools to help these kids under DEI and all this SEL stuff. And they're saying, look, you might not...
the buzzwords are flying hard and heavy. Everybody in chat, do be ready to take cover in case we get hit by the buzzwords. We got the DEI, we got the... what the hell is SEL? Is that... Search engine optimization? Search engine lobsterization.
Not be accepted where you are. Maybe they're just getting bullied, or maybe they're going through puberty. I mean, I had a hard time in
yeah, I mean, maybe they are going through puberty, and that is the problem, because being trans, the puberty they're having is inherently traumatic, and so blockers help with that. Or is she saying that being trans is just a normal pubescent thing that people have? Because I don't think that's the case.
5th, 6th, 7th grade. Most people do.
Maybe
But
try
what they're
exercise.
doing
Most people what? Most people go... Wait, what is she saying? Most people go through puberty? Okay, true. Or is she saying most people go through a phase where they're like, yeah, actually, I think, like, the gendered manifestations of my body are very uncomfortable, and I would like to put an end to those because they're the wrong ones.
they're taking
Is she saying that this woman is just word salad?
them then. Exactly.
I've done so
they
many
are
things for
destroying these
depression.
kids.
I'm sorry. I've done
Go
so many.
ahead. Good.
I remember doing when ketamine, all the rich people were doing ketamine for depression.
Okay.
Which, by the way, is prescribed now
Yeah, because it actually does help.
and works better than those other ones the
Right,
classic ones.
The
You know what works
SSRIs.
better than all of them? I discovered, and I feel like a real jerk off.
Well, I mean, I can see how he would feel like a real jerk off. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, very good point. I mean, they're talking about this like this new thing that trans people have only been around for like one generation. When Magnus Hirschfeld was already working towards a non-pathologizing approach to gender diversity at the Institut für Sexualwissenschaft back in Berlin in the Weimar Republic. So yeah.
Just exercising. Cheaper.
Wait, he feels like a jerk off when he's just exercising? What is he exercising? His wrist?
than the prescription.
Exercising works as good, they found, as the SSRI inhibitors. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
SSRI inhibitors. Man, I mean, these people, they have such confidence with what they're saying, and what they're saying makes no sense. We've got, Dr. Schill over there talking about puberty blockers, and he doesn't even know that they are all gonadotropin-releasing hormone inhibitors. It isn't like there's one for one hormone and another for another hormone. We've got Demi Jor here, who apparently doesn't know that the I in SSRI stands for inhibitor. We've got Melkshow, the milking show. Like, she must get some really weird DMs from German speakers with a name like that. Like, where are your cows? Speaking of cows and brands and shit, who's just, like, going off on a right one. Jesus,
Meaning
I
Prozac
would say
and
way better. I
Zoloft.
would say way. I cannot believe
Yeah.
the level of help. For years, I lived in New York, didn't get any sun.
sample size.
All my friends, a bunch of people taking Ozempic. That's the other side. If you're not transing, you're taking Ozempic for the rest of your
Right.
life.
Wait, okay, so that is the those are the two types of people. They're the people who are transing, and the people who are taking Ozempic for the rest of their lives. So what? Those are the two options. Those are the two doors you can walk through. What the? Like, do these motherfuckers think about this stuff? Do they prepare for these discussions, or do they just get drunk and trust their luck?
So now, this is the most crazy thing. I wish Dr. Phil would get where I'm at, because I'm glad he's noticed now and is saying,
Well, I mean, in terms of looking like a jerk off, I think he's right where you're at. I mean, that is how he defined where he's at. He said he looks like a jerk off. And, I mean, Dr. Phil, all these bald motherfuckers? Bald grifters.
I'm happy everyone's noticing now. But so you're gonna eugenically castrate the children. Canada's already making it legal for kids to decide to commit suicide.
No, it isn't. Not kids. And also, eugenically castrate the children. Like, I mean, these motherfuckers, it's just... A fact checker would tear their hair out at this, because the bullshit per, like, subclause, not just per sentence, but per subclause ratio is remarkably high.
Assisted suicide. You've seen that, right?
Yeah.
So does this sound familiar to anybody? We help Nazis.
No, well, yes, you help Nazis. Stop I mean, like, yeah, you got one on your show, in fact, right now.
We salute them in Canada. We're fun.
I mean, you're saluting them right now. I mean, yes, true, they did salute a guy that was a, like, actually fairly well-known Nazi in the House of Commons. But, yeah, this is fash infighting we're looking at.
Funding them, where people with mental things, were just castrating them, eventually humanely euthanizing them.
Yeah, I mean, this is the last time I checked up on Jimmy Dore. It was nowhere near this wild. Jesus. Like, this is the sort of thing, like, Tim Pool would look at this and be like, these guys aren't particularly coherent.
Does this remind anybody of anything?
Yeah, it reminds me of the same bullshit that Melchor was just saying.
Anything at all. A Reich, if you will.
Yeah, a Reich, if you mean like the Third Reich. The ones who, persecuted trans people. The ones who burned the library of the Institut für Sexualwissenschaft specifically because it was doing gender-affirming care. Yeah, yeah, you do remind me of that. Thanks for pointing it out, Kurt Metzger. The reason I was realizing, the reason the name was familiar is I was confusing him with Tom Metzger, the neo-Nazi. And, I mean, I don't know how I could have done that. I don't know how I could have confused him with a neo-Nazi, but we got another half hour or so left in the show. So, there's time for another one. So, we've got Vush with the next Benedict conspiracy, whatever that's going to be, and I really kind of shudder to think. We've got 2 Caleb Muppet options. We've got woke cartoon roasted. Like, anyone have any particular thought on which of those they might like to check out? Or there's socialism is pro-growth. Or we've got Caleb Muppet chatting with Libertarian against the state. Or Xanderhole with the Taliban is taking over YouTube, though I think I'd like to give Xanderhole a miss this time, because each time I check him out, it's been like the worst thing he's ever said that I've heard. And I'd like to sort of let that, I'd like a break from him, I'm thinking. So, any preferences, chat? God, okay, I need to turn this tab. I had Kurt Metzger's fucking... Ah, moin gegeben. Ich war weniger schockiert. Also, dass sowas kommt, war eigentlich abzusehen. Muppet. Okay, we've got Muppet with a libertarian against the state. We've got Socialism is Pro-Growth with Ashley Frawley. I don't know who she is. Or we've got Caleb Muppet on Millet's Davos speech. I think that the best one of these will probably be either Socialism is Pro-Growth or Chat with Libertarian against the state. So, I think we're gonna go with the latter.
So, all right, welcome against the state. How you doing?
I'm doing
you
great,
doing?
thank you.
I love this like nostril intensive camera angle he set up. Like he goes to the trouble to set up a background.
Thank you so much for having me on, Caleb.
And this other motherfucker doesn't actually even try to stay in frame. Oh God, yes, that one where the guy was actually absolutely cooking him, talking about, well, I don't know, but at least I know that if I go to the trouble of picking out a tie, I don't hide it behind a fucking sweater vest. That was classic.
Sure, and you're in Canada?
See if we can improve the, like, look at these fucking camera angles.
Actually, I'm in the Philippines, but I'm from Canada.
Oh, that bodes well. I mean, if there's one thing that you know is never going to be up to no good, it's right-wing libertarians going to the Philippines. They only ever do that for totally above-board reasons that are nothing to do with the age of consent.
I'm Canadian.
Oh, you're in the Philippines. Wow, how did you get to the Philippines?
Yeah,
Oh, he fucking flew, I would guess.
I took a plane. I flew. I was actually in.
This is like, has he heard of the rule of thirds? I mean, look, you can see his ring light reflected in his eyeballs, for fuck's sake.
Sao Paulo, Brazil, of all places, and I flew out here.
Are you on vacation?
He, like, literally thought he meant, what mode of transportation did you use?
This was well, actually, my son was born here, so he's technically Filipino, and my
Okay.
fiance lives here. So basically, my family's here.
Oh, okay, that's neat. Very good. Okay. Well, yeah. So what is it you wanted to talk to me about?
Okay, where's this gonna go? Okay, have a good night, NR. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing less dodgy than a right-wing libertarian in the Philippines. So what's the over/under, chat, on what this is gonna be about? Let me just give it a minute. Gonna give it a second. We're going to you can pause for a couple of seconds while we work this out, as Agad Mathur would say. What do you think he's gonna want to talk about? I mean, I think age of consent is probably a strong bet. I do not pre-watch this stuff. I only subject this stuff when I have a microphone to shout about it into. I've God, this is like you. It feels like you could like reach out and grab that fucking nose of his.
Yeah. So I've been watching your stuff on YouTube, and I was watching the stream, and I think you make some good points.
That should not like seriously. This okay, Caleb Muppet, for anyone who is not familiar, likes to pretend he's a communist. He's not one. He's very much not one. He's a Nazbol. He's a big fan of Dugin, and he thinks fascism is communism. But if like if fucking right libertarian said, I've been watching your stuff and you make a lot of good points to me, I would immediately start to question fundamental things about what I'd been saying on YouTube. Hey, Jinjiri, how you doing?
I agree that I don't think China is a global threat. I don't think there's any historical evidence. Have they ever really invaded a country? I mean, some territorial disputes or whatever. Whereas you look at United States, they've attacked.
What? Okay, even Muppet's gonna correct him on that. Also, ich weiß nicht, ob er mit einem Verbrecher spricht, aber, also, ich sag's mal so, wenn so sogenannte Libertäre, also diese Rechten, die sich libertär nennen, Anarchokapitalisten nennen sie sich auch, wenn die sich nach so Philippinen oder so Inselstaaten in der Pazifik so begeben, dann meistens nicht, um die Landschaften zu bewundern. Da hat es viel eher damit zu tun, dass Beischlaf mit Minderjährigen zulässig ist und sie ja also zu einem nicht unerheblichen Teil aus Kinderschändern bestehen, ihre Bewegung.
They did invade Vietnam in 1978. They did invade Vietnam in 1978, the Kampuchea War. And what that was Henry Kissinger was playing the communists against each other. After the USA pulled out of Vietnam, Pol Pot, who was getting covertly backed by the United States, attacked.
I mean, he's not wrong about this here.
Vietnam, and Pol Pot was aligned with the Chinese communists, and Vietnam was aligned with the Soviet communists, and that was a horrendous event, the Kampuchea War of 1978. That's the last war China's been involved in. They haven't done a military operation outside of the country since 1978, right? You know how many overseas military bases China has? One. They have one. And
okay.
And it's in the African country of Djibouti, whereas Russia has about 8.
Actually, China has one in the U.S. has tons of them in Djibouti. I remember watching this guy's Drew Binsky or something like that. He does this thing where he's like trying to travel to every single country in the world. I think he's actually managed it. And he had one where I just got on a bit of a rabbit hole with his channel. And one was like the most unfriendly country around, and I believe it was Djibouti. And he was pointing out, I mean, it was just a huge. The entire country has been taken over by like U.S. military bases.
And the United States has at least 900 overseas military bases. Some people say possibly 1,000. So the idea that they're a global threat that we're hearing from the neocons and stuff is just outrageous. But continue. Just wanted to get that in there. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, Vietnam, obviously. You want to talk about Vietnam, the unjust American attacks on first on southern Vietnam at the behest of the French.
Well, I mean, not so much at the behest of the French. I mean, that's not quite right. I mean, the U.S. backed the French. I mean, the Marshall Plan, which the U.S. always likes to point out as like proof of how benevolent they are internationally, actually matched the funds that Western European countries were spending on their expeditionary forces to retake their colonies. And so, I mean, the US wasn't so much doing this at the behest of France, as France was doing this at the behest of the US. And then when France failed to maintain control of, when France failed to maintain control of Vietnam, the US took over from
back
them.
when it was all their allies, their later allies, you know, and then they set up the puppet government in Saigon, you know, which is now Ho Chi Minh City. I'm actually planning to visit there soon. You know, it's such an interesting culture, and it's a really cheap flight because I'm in the Philippines. So
Yeah, I mean, I do find it funny that a right libertarian is so keen on visiting a country whose entire like every bit of success they've had in economic development has been the refutation of everything this motherfucker believes in.
there's no like it's like $100 flight, you know, so there's no point not to.
Okay.
But I do think we have some areas of disagreement. So I'm a big fan of the free market economy.
Now that's funny because Vietnam isn't.
And why do you prefer communism to capitalism? That's what
Well, the first thing is he doesn't.
I'd like to know.
Well, communism is the ultimate goal, and it's a world with so much wealth and so much abundance that the need for any state,
Communism is when line go up.
the need for any government, the need for any social hierarchy can fade away, right? That's the idea. That's the higher stage of communism. But the road to getting there is called socialism, and that's when we organize the economy so we don't have people homeless because there are too many houses. We don't have people hungry because there's too much food, and we rationally organize the economy.
So here he is actually acknowledging objective overproduction, which, if you'll remember, he used to call people Malthusians for pointing it out.
In order for growth to no longer be restrained by the irrationality of the market, because
yeah, it's not about restraining growth. I mean, this idea, this is his thing. His whole thing is that communism is when line grow up. I mean, it is very much a LaRouche thing. Like, he believes that there is, there's unlimited, growth in capitalism, and that growth is an unalloyed good. I mean, and it is just wild. It is just, fucking Koch Foundation bullshit.
human labor is more productive than it's ever been before. But because of this profit system, that's making us poorer instead of making us richer. So we should have a planned economy, control the means of production. I think a market
Who controls the means of production, though, Caleb?
has a role in the planned economy, and we're seeing that in Vietnam. We're seeing that in China. We're seeing that in...
Well, I mean, what we're seeing in the case of Vietnam in particular is that the only way that they could get the U.S. to stop the massive economic warfare that was starving their people after the U.S. had already completely destroyed their fucking country, making it impossible for them to recover economically. Literally the only way that they could get any kind of help, since the U.S. was explicitly refusing to pay reparations, Jimmy Carter said the destruction was mutual. That was why the U.S. wasn't going to pay reparations for their, aggression and occupation of Vietnam. So, literally the only way that they had any option that they could see was to sort of adopt some level of capitalist system and just try to position it within a large amount of basically social democracy, so that they could at least get some kind of funds flowing in so that they could possibly rebuild the place. That was not the initial goal.
in other socialist countries. I don't think that means we should get rid of the market entirely, but I do think that you have to have, state central planning to make sure that the means of production and the major centers of economic power function in the interests of society overall.
So would it be fair to say that you support market socialism?
Well, what the fuck does that? I mean, yeah, I guess he would probably call it that, But yeah, I mean, what he's supporting isn't actually socialism either.
Yes, yeah, I do. I think that, you know,
like Vosh, though. That's what Vosh likes to say when he's not just being a straight up neoliberal.
that the Soviet Union had many great successes, and that in order to just industrialize a country, right, to get over that first hurdle, you know, you might have to have full state ownership. But after that, yeah, I think that we've learned in the 21st century that in order to have things like restaurants and hotels and
Because I mean, you can't have restaurants and hotels with state ownership. I mean, I'm an anarcho-communist. I don't want the state to be involved in shit. I don't want capital to be involved in shit. But to say that it is impossible to have hotels and restaurants, including nice ones, with like some form of public ownership is just nonsense. I mean, and it's really telling, and I think it is indicative of one of the things I've noticed in the past year is that there seems to be a pivot towards China on Caleb Muppet's part. That he's trying to expand his grift to get the people who support China's approach to state capitalism. Because there's a lot of money in that. Potentially. But I mean, it's just like there are, if you go, for example, to North Korea, what you will find is they do have restaurants and fucking hotels and stuff that are state owned. That does not inherently make it impossible to have a good restaurant or hotel. Like, they're actually, by all accounts, very nice. So, I mean, it's just such a... This is the sort of argument, actually, I'm more used to hearing from, like... Well, I mean, fittingly enough, from right-wingers explaining why social democracy bad.
and you know, the things that make life fun, consumer goods, children's toys, clothing, these kind of things you do need a market incentive for.
Why? Like, why exactly? And what is a market incentive, incidentally? I mean, the incentive that you're usually talking about there is the fact that if you don't sell yourself out for a wage, you will die of starvation and exposure. That's usually what they mean by it. Like, what does any of this mean?
But the market and profits shouldn't be in control, right? And
what the fuck does that mean?
That you need the guiding hand of a popular working class government. You need state control over the energy sector. You need state control over things like healthcare and
I would like he's literally describing Clem Attlee and the 1960s, 1970s Labor Party right here. This is literally the Labor Party before Blair. His positions here. I mean, the towering... I think I've even heard him use the words the towering heights of the economy, which was how Clause 4 about state ownership in the economy of the Labor Party Constitution was written until fucking Tony Blair's people took over. But, I mean, what he's describing is, you know, post-war Britain, because, like, the steel industry, the energy industry, the water industry, the railways, transport in general was state-owned, as were, like, the coal mines and the shipyards and all that shit, and the healthcare system and the education system and everything like that for the most part. I mean... he's just describing post-war Britain. This is his definition of socialism.
You know, that key vital sectors of the economy should be regulated. And those private companies, the state...
This is just... I mean, this is hilarious, because he will occasionally attack BreadTube, which he defines differently depending on, like, what, who he's trying to slag off at a given time. Because by claiming that all they want is capitalism but with worker co-ops. And here he is, once again, saying that actually what he wants is 1960s British social democracy.
Should be able to step in and make sure they work in the interest of the country overall. And the main way they can do that is by controlling the bank, right? The banking system, kind of like Alexander Hamilton called for a great national...
Oh, God, he's Lin Manuel Miranda.
Bank, right? If the government controls the purse strings and you don't have private lenders and you don't have a Federal Reserve, if the government is the one.
Oh God, I mean, like, he's managing to stick all sorts of interesting things in there. Because the thing about the Federal Reserve, it's worth noting. I mean, this is a thing you hear, actually. He's very specifically. This is. Okay, let me back up. This is something you see with him more generally. He really changes his message according to the room he's in. Like, when he was in a room giving a speech to a bunch of Russian and French fascists in Moscow, suddenly he didn't believe he was a populist. You know, certainly not any kind of a communist. And his big idol was Huey Long. You know, and now he's like dog whistling "End the Fed," which actually, if you actually know the history of the U.S. monetary system, ending the Fed actually would make the monetary system more privatized than it is now. Like, before the Fed, you had all of these different independent banks putting out banknotes of varying levels of regional acceptance and reliability, and there were economic crises all the time because these banks would just go bust. And, you know, you would have paper money that you could use in, like, Chicago, but if you went out to Peoria, you'd find out your fucking money was no good. I mean, when they're talking about end the Fed, which is what he is telegraphing here in this conversation with this right libertarian, that's what he's talking about.
Giving loans, they can kind of stimulate the economy. Economic activity would be good for the community, and allow the market to do its work by incentivizing people with loans and other stimulus, etc. But
like, okay, this is just, I mean, fairly textbook fucking capitalist arguments here. And the question is, if you've already got a, like, say, state-controlled monetary system that is choosing what to finance and what not to, then why exactly do you need a private capitalist class in the first place? Why? I mean, if the control over what gets financed in the economy is already going to be in the state sector, then the only reason to have, like, a separate capitalist class in the first place is that it allows them to grift on the side. Yeah, I mean, this is just such nonsense.
But, ultimately, I just don't think the chaos of the market can be trusted.
And yet you want to maintain the chaos of the market.
I think that banking reform is actually very important. The role of the Federal Reserve, in my opinion, has been to cartelize the banking system and cartelize the money supply to
do what? To kernelize it? Like what? Like candy corn?
allow banks to basically create money out of thin air, enriching themselves at the expense of society. So,
yep. Yeah. In other words, fucking Muppet has your number. Yeah, because the thing is, he didn't go to Occupy for nothing. There were plenty of, like, far-right libertarian types, anarcho-capitalist motherfuckers, hanging around Occupy, selling that end the Fed bullshit. Hey, Black Anarchic Reacts, good to see you. I've been watching your stuff on Nature Boy. That has been very interesting. I had not actually been... I learn something new every time I check out your channel, and in fact... I'm going to just drop a link in here because that is a channel that I wholeheartedly recommend. Black Anarchic Reacts. Let me get that link in here. There, ahí estamos, weón. Yeah. Here we go. Very, very highly recommended channel. And always good to have you in chat because you do a very good job of hey, South of Sublime, of filling in my gaps. It's one of the things I love about doing streaming is that yeah, having people in chat who can sort of fill in my gaps. Yeah, you missed. I don't know how early you came in, but we started out this thing watching fucking Jimmy Dore on some wild shit. Because he had, he was looking at Joe Rogan and Dr. Fool talking out their asses about trans people. And then he turns to his own panel, which manages to be less coherent and more reactionary and just straight up militia bullshit than Joe Rogan's fucking podcast. It was wild. Like, I hadn't looked at Jimmy Dore much. I don't look at him much because he kind of bores me. But Jesus, that was like, wow, the level of just straight up incoherence. Like, you had fucking Dr. Fool talking about how bad puberty blockers are, and he literally did not know what puberty blockers are. He just openly didn't admit. He admitted like he had no idea what sort of drugs are used for that. And then Jimmy Dore goes on and is like, well, why don't we ask Mel K about this? And she goes, oh, it's all about the black helicopters and Agenda 2030. And I'd never heard of this woman, but holy shit. Like, I mean, just like Timothy McVeigh level militia bullshit from about 1990. So that's what, and then after that we switched over to, this is Caleb Muppet explaining why he wants to be like the Labour Party in Britain in the 1960s and call it socialism. Like, and just sort of telegraphing some end the Fed bullshit because he was at Occupy Wall Street and he knows that that's the stuff to you get. Yeah, that was a very good decision in retrospect. God, it's that. I mean, I sometimes do Tim Pool podcasts on here, and that shit's incoherent. Caleb Maupin, when he does public speaking engagements, is pretty incoherent. We had a few weeks ago. We had him talking about the pessimism of that poem about a poem as beautiful as a tree, and how that was the result of the guy having been to World War I, which he didn't do until 4 years after he wrote the fucking poem, and then he went off on some other weird ass tangent. But this was more incoherent than that. It was just absolutely just giving me whiplash. But I see it's yo. There is some wonderful Caleb Maupin stuff to look at, and I will be. We are actually about to be wrapping up, unfortunately, since it's 12:54 now, and I wrap up around 1 so that people can sleep around me. But I'm going to be back at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time tomorrow, and love to see you there. Love to see all of you there, and yeah, so let me just drop the Discord link for anyone who hasn't already got it, and we will stick a pin in Caleb and his weird-ass one-party social democracy tomorrow, probably. Unless I find something better or somebody recommends something better. Have a good night. And good to see you streaming again, by the way, Black Anarchic Reacts. I know you've been going through some shit. I hope you're managing to get that sorted out, because it just sounds like a rough period. Have a good night, everyone.